All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners Investor Select Conference. My name is Robert Blum, Managing Partner of Lytham Partners. During this webcast, we welcome Jaguar Health, ticker symbol of JAGX on the NASDAQ, and their CEO, Lisa Conte. I've asked Lisa to go through the slide presentation first, and then we'll look to engage in a short fireside chat-like session. Before I do turn it over to Lisa, I want to remind everyone that if you've not already signed up for a one-on-one meeting and would like to do so, you can send me an email at Blum, B-L-U-M, at lythampartners.com, or visit our website, lythampartners.com/virtual. Click on the one-on-one meeting request button, and we will look to get you taken care of. So with that said, Lisa, the floor is yours. Please begin.
Thank you, Robert. And I think Lytham Partners does the best job for small cap companies. So I'm so pleased to continue to be invited back. And thank you. And dismiss our forward-looking statements. People have seen those before. And I want to jump in by saying, particularly anybody who's heard this story before, what's going to be different now, particularly sort of in this tough time in the market, particularly with biotech, particularly with small cap, that we are in the nice position of being about 6 to 7 months away from what we feel are going to be major transformative events in the ability to recognize the value of Jaguar Health. And they all had to do with clinical trials and moving pipeline opportunities to real revenue generating opportunities. And you do clinical trials and drug development over years and years and years. And it just so happens that we have two that are hitting major milestones in the next 6 to 7 months. So I'm going to keep coming back to that theme. Overall, just to remind everybody what we do all drug discovery from plants that are used traditionally in tropical areas, and we do have a product on the market, Mytesi, right here. And it is plant-based, natural, organic, sustainably harvested, and it is an FDA-approved drug, and it is the only drug approved by the FDA under botanical guidance. And under botanical guidance, there is no practical pathway to generate a generic. So even though we have 150-something patents that are issued, which we'll talk about later on, and filing new IP all the time, we essentially have exclusivity forever. So what's powerful about Mytesi is it is approved. And it's approved for a specialty market of HIV-related diarrhea. Another word for specialty is relatively small. The power here and those two transformative moments is the pipeline opportunities. It is a pipeline within a product. You can see here 7, 8 different patient populations. We can't do them all. And what we have focused on over the past years is cancer therapy-related diarrhea, and we are in the final stages of the phase 3 pivotal trial to expand the indication of Mytesi, which is already approved, for cancer therapy-related diarrhea with success in that clinical trial. That trial is expected to complete enrollment in April of this year, 2023, just around the corner. We are on track for that. And a second indication of Crofelemer, which is the API name. The trade name is Mytesi. The API name is Crofelemer. So Crofelemer, in a different formulation for an orphaned indication and the whole orphan drug business model, which we'll talk about in a moment, of short bowel syndrome and congenital diarrheal disease. And to give you some idea of how big that can be relative to the specialty market that we're in now, HIV will probably never be more than $30, $40, $50 million in the United States. Cancer therapy-related diarrhea is the most common side effect associated with cancer treatment and a chronic issue with the new targeted therapies that are being used to put patients in a curative situation, or even if they're in a maintenance situation under a metastatic situation. There's about 70 different targeted therapies that are approved now, 25 that have more than 50% diarrhea. These are agents that are taken every single day. To put that in an analogous market opportunity, chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, those agents are typically taken for the first 3 days during cycle chemotherapy. There's a lot of generics out in this market, yet that market is expected to hit close to $3 billion this year. So you can get some idea of the order of magnitude of how important an unmet medical need is to the patients to the healthcare system to cancer care. If patients are not staying on their cancer therapies because diarrhea, they are going to have worse outcomes in their cancer care. It's going to be more costly to take care of them if you have to manage with rehydration in the hospital. For short bowel syndrome, to give you some idea, this is a classic rare disease business model, so small population. There's about 40,000 short bowel syndrome patients around the world, very expensive chronically to manage these patients, so you have high reimbursement typically for the treatment of these patients, the maintenance of these patients. Third-party research puts us at about a $5 billion market in 2027. We'll talk about some reasons for that. So major markets, again, transformative events in terms of the clinical data that we expect to have in the next 6 to 7 months in each of those indications, moving them to revenue-generating opportunities. And we do have some other news. Just about a week or two ago, during JP Morgan, we announced a non-Crofelemer related business development activity, and it was the formation of a joint venture called Magdalena Biosciences. Magdalena is named after the principal river that goes through the Andes and up north through Colombia, empties into the Caribbean Sea, a beautiful, beautiful major force there in Colombia. And this is to focus on our skill set, what we know how to do without a lot of additional resources to develop botanical drugs under botanical guidance to understand the manufacturing, the supply, the regulatory issues associated with that. And the focus is on attention deficit ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in adults, and some other mental health disorders as well. This is a joint venture that has been funded with $1 million from the Petterfly family. It's called One Small Planet, and really progressive in their funding and their vision for different ways to change and bring new opportunities to treat and potentially cure mental health disorders. It's about a $5 million joint venture, and Jaguar owns around 40% of it. Where this came from is a library that we have collected over 30 years. We've been in business about 30 years of 2,300 plants, 3,500 plant extracts. These are non-Crofelemer related, about 20% of which have some traditional use in the central nervous system area. So as we looked at these industries that developed a couple of years ago around psychoactive and psychedelic medicines, a lot of resources, a lot of interest, a lot of innovation on the regulatory and the clinical trial side, but all focusing on about the same 7 compounds: psilocybin, MDMA, ketamines, LSD. What was the potential for second generation new ways of thinking about mechanisms to treat and potentially cure mental health disorders? So we were leveraging a resource that we had developed and funded over about 30 years. It took very little additional resource from us. We started about 18 months ago, and quite proud to say we've already formed this joint venture. The purpose of the joint venture is to move this to the stage of bring this towards clinical stage, identify a key new mechanism of action with a naturally derived product, and then bring in some major partnership, perhaps from one of these companies that are well-financed in the psychoactive and the psychedelic area, and use their expertise and experience on the regulatory and the clinical side, and to continue to leverage our expertise on the botanical side. And part of the joint venture is Filament Health, which has the natural product chemistry capability. Back to Crofelemer. This is the key asset with the 2, what we feel are major value transformative events. I can't say that enough over the next 6 to 7 months. What's important about Crofelemer, it's the first-in-class mechanism of action, anti-secretory. And it's important what it does do and what it doesn't do. And that's why there's so many different disease patient populations that it can benefit. So what it does do basically is it normalizes gut function. And it does so without being an opioid. Loperamide, Imodium, these are weak opioids, in some cases not so weak opioids. And basically they work by the mechanism of constipation. So They interfere in complicated patients with the normal metabolism and absorption of their life-saving medications. You can't be constipated on a chronic basis. So there's, as you think about a new paradigm with targeted cancer agents that are being used every single day, in some cases for years or through the patients the rest of their life, this is not an acute fix to just block something up. You need something that normalizes gut function. Crofelemer not only does that, it's not an antibiotic, so we don't have to worry about resistance. Of course, we don't have the constipation risk of an opioid, don't have the addictive risk, and it works locally in the gut. So you take it orally, it's a pill, you swallow it, goes into the intestine, does its thing, and then out it goes. So you don't have drug-drug interactions, you don't have secondary metabolites causing problems later on, you don't have a first pass effect. So safety is a huge, huge important hallmark of crofelemer, and why it works in acute and chronic situations. We have focused on the complicated patients in the chronic situation to really highlight the advantages of this mechanism of action. And because Mytesi is already approved for a chronic indication, we already have a regulatory approval of safety for a chronic situation. For example, we have 2 years carcinogenicity studies that are already completed. Obviously, we have a full supply chain in place from the rainforest to a bottle that you can find in essentially any pharmacy where we're distributing the product. So the key thing is the efficacy that we're looking for in our pivotal trials on the primary endpoint. So let's get to that. So one of these key transformative events is the phase 3 pivotal trial for cancer therapy-related diarrhea, which is ongoing right now. Go right to the bottom, 256 patients, double-blind, placebo control. We're well over halfway there right now. Enrollment is expected to be completed in April of this year. The primary endpoint is after 3 months, and then you can roll out when we would expect to have the p-value sometime in the third quarter of this year. There's a lot of data that led to this trial. I think a key piece of information is that 40% of patients who have cancer therapy-related diarrhea stop their chemotherapy or go to a subtherapeutic dose because of the diarrhea. So as I said, now it's not something that's just supportive care or the dignity of the patient, which is very important, but you're getting to the heart of the matter. You're getting to the actual outcome of the treatment of the cancer. And some of the patients that I have spoken to, for example, when supportive care and side effects are well managed, it's all focused patient and healthcare provider on curing the cancer. And when those side effects are not well managed, that thought goes out the window. It's all, oh my God, how do I get through the next day? How do I get out of the house? So really, really important for a whole comprehensive care of the cancer patient. This trial is a prophylaxis trial. So of the, as I said, 70 or so targeted therapies that are out there, we would like to have the opportunity for every single patient not to have the risk of managing diarrhea, which is very much the culture and the guidelines that you see with chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. And that's where we want to go with prophylaxis for diarrhea. There's no other agents out there that have been tested or approved or meet this paradigm shift of chronic management for diarrhea in a cancer patient. Part of the reason why patient enrollment has really rapidly increased is very recently we opened up some international sites, which of course are relevant to the FDA approval. And I think we're seeing that throughout the pharmaceutical industry, that sites outside of the countries, outside of the United States, several countries have made it a point that high quality, rapidly enrolling, less competition for other agents that may be in the cancer patient, really put a focus on having that be one of their major businesses, and it really is working out well. So we're very pleased with that situation. Again, expect patient enrollment completed by April, 3 months to the primary endpoint. In the third quarter, we expect to have that p-value for the primary endpoint for this product, a product that is the same dose, the same formulation. So what we're looking for is a label extension on a product that's already approved. And by the way, as we looked into it, most new drug applications fail because of a safety or manufacturing issue. So with a label expansion, we don't have to deal with those particular risks. Now we're going to go move to short bowel syndrome, classic rare disease business model. Very, very important, the patients that you're dealing with, and there's all sorts of patient support groups which have been so important to legislation in this area. And there's a bit of a money thing, because when you're, particularly for small companies, when you're dealing with a rare disease, you have smaller clinical trials, greater access to regulatory information and advice. There's other sort of financial opportunities, and less pressure on the pricing and the reimbursement when you're talking about chronically ill patients that are very, very expensive to manage, often in and out of the hospital and in and out of the healthcare system. So in particular with short bowel syndrome, what this is a situation where a normal person has a gut that's maybe 20, 25 feet. Short bowel is 5 feet or less. It could be as small as 30 centimeters. So the patient doesn't have enough surface area, enough real estate to absorb the nutrients of life, proteins, carbs, vitamins, etc. And so what they end up doing is living on parenteral nutrition, IV nutrition, sometimes for 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. No quality of life, great limitations, and all sorts of opportunity for complications that ends up putting the patients in the hospital, high mortality, high morbidity, and high mortality as well. So there is a product that is out there now, glutathione, hard to say. It's only used in about 1 to 2% of the patients. It's essentially a growth hormone. So what it hopes to do, and what it does do sometimes, is grow the gut a bit so that there's a little bit more time for the absorption of the nutrients of life. There's a fair amount of toxicity associated with this compound, so it's not standard of care. As I said, only about 1 to 2% of the patients has some cardiovascular toxicity, metabolic toxicity. Nevertheless, in the United States, the patients that get it get reimbursed at the rate of about $500,000 a year. In Europe, it might be $200,000 to $300,000 a year. And the endpoint was the reduction of parenteral nutrition need by about 15 to 20%. So there is a known endpoint out there for that level of reimbursement. So what we're looking to do with Crofelemer is, before patients would even be considered for glutathione, which, as I said, or any growth hormone, there's a bunch of biosimilars that are in development, which is not standard of care, is decrease the secretions. Crofelemer is a novel anti-secretory. Decrease the secretions into the gut enough so that we get that same potential level of parenteral nutrition reduction, 15 to 20%. And also get better stool formation, which is the anti-diarrheal benefit of Crofelemer. And we'll also look at quality of life endpoints, which some of the other agents that are in development have not been looking at, and is important for reimbursement organizations. This is being done in Europe, because in Europe, there is an opportunity that you don't have in the United States for rare unmet medical needs, which is early patient access. Based on having a CTA, which is like an IND, based on having a clinical trial started, and having published proof of concept data, which can come from an investigator-initiated trial, there is an opportunity for patients to have access to the drug in a reimbursed manner to the manufacturer under an early patient access program through the EMA, the FDA of Europe, which does not exist in the United States. That may have to do with something because it's a single-payer healthcare system, but whatever, it's a program that exists in Europe that there are some patient groups that are advocating for here in the United States now. So we are in the midst of investigator-initiated programs, multiple programs that are being pursued at the same time to lead to published proof of concept data coincident with the CTA filing in Europe that can lead to early patient access revenue generation in 2023. And some of those IITs are expected in the third quarter of this year, at the same time that we're talking about the primary endpoint for the cancer trial. So these two major events that turn a pipeline opportunity to, with success, revenue generating opportunities in about a 6 to 7 month time frame, which we feel will be transformative for the value recognition of Jaguar, and as all biotech companies are facing right now this year. There is another parenteral nutrition intestinal failure population, which is ultra rare, called congenital diarrheal disease, that Jaguar will actually be pursuing in the United States under an IND in 2023. We do have a program for a second generation anti-secretory called NP300, and that has received approval to go forward with an IND for cholera treatment, and we do have some published data in cholera. This is not a program that we're funding into phase 1 clinical trials at this exact moment, because we are putting our resources towards these two events that can be transformative, and the completion of a phase 1 clinical trial we didn't feel would give that type of value recognition. There is another version of Crofelemer called Canalevia for dogs, chemotherapy-induced diarrhea in dogs under conditional approval, which is like orphan drug for dogs. Similar dynamics, about 40% of the time, the dog will go off their cancer therapy because of diarrhea. In the dog population, to the decision maker, which is the pet parent, it's even more important, the comfort and the quality of life of the dog, since you can't explain to them, just suck it up for 6 months or whatever, you'll feel better at the end of it. And the quality of life for the whole household. You don't want a dog that has lost control. If you are going to spend the money to put the dog through chemotherapy, you sure as heck want to make sure that they can stay on it. So it's a small market, another specialty market, but a very important one, and remarkably analogous to, from a physiological point of view, and predictive of what we expect to see in humans for cancer therapy-related diarrhea. This is our specialty market for HID, our performance, our turnover for Mytesi. Currently, we have shifted to a specialty pharma opportunity, which provides much greater patient access, a comprehensive patient access program. We did that in about the second quarter of 2020. You can see where those net revenue numbers went up. They went back down again because we shifted from a warehousing model that was holding 70 days of inventory to a just-in-time inventory model that is all, I mean, to buy down the inventory, that is all complete. And now we have about 10, 15, 20% growth every single quarter, and you can expect to continue to see that throughout 2023. Again, that's a specialty market, so it'll never be more than 30, 40, $50 million. But that is the product for cancer therapy-related diarrhea where we look to expand the indication. We did just complete a reverse split, so we are now trading more in the $5 range, and we felt that it was important to have everything that we can to attract the institutional and the long holders into this company in anticipation of these two major pieces of information coming out. A lot of news, a lot of volume. We still have a lot of volume. We have a team. 10 of us have been together over 15 years. 3 of us have been together over 32 years, committed to bring this over into the end zone here and really get it to all the patients in need in all the different parts of the world. We do have global unencumbered rights to Crofelemer, so you can expect to see more business development deals around Crofelemer and Mytesi, as well as we want to gain access around the world. The team in Europe and the company that we established in Europe for the short bowel syndrome focus is Napo Therapeutics, and that has its own management team. So there's 2 teams that have a primary focus. In the US, here's cancer therapy-related diarrhea. In Europe, the focus where the early patient access program is the rare disease indication, but there's a very close relationship, and it's a license agreement. So Jaguar has upfront fees, milestone payments, et cetera, royalties. We also are well over the majority shareholder of Napo Therapeutics, an equity basis that has not been recognized in the valuation of Jaguar either. And that is everything that I've told you. The one thing that I will say, this last point here, we do have 145 patents issued. We file new patents all the time. However, we do feel that approval under botanical guidance is remarkable, and that's essentially exclusivity forever, and really interesting in business development conversations when you're determining the terminal value of the asset. So I will stop there, and thank you for listening, and it's a big year for us.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Lisa. I appreciate it. I think we've got a couple minutes here. I just want to run over maybe a couple topics here. First one here, and you can pull your screen down there if you like. There, perfect. Do you intend to sort of pursue approval for Crofelemer for short bowel syndrome and congenital diarrheal disorders in the U.S. as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's licensed to Napo Therapeutics for the European market, but as with, most, if not all licensed deal, another value is all that data that is generated for the European market, some of which may be generated in the United States, is available for us to not only use in the United States, but as I discussed, as we may license and partner in other parts of the world as well.
All right. Help us understand why you're focusing on NP300 drug candidate rather than Crofelemer for a possible indication for the, I think it was a symptomatic relief and treatment of diarrhea for cholera and other pathogens. So why NP300 there?
So thank you for asking that question. I forgot to mention that cholera is being pursued under the financial incentive from the FDA for a tropical disease priority review voucher. So just like priority review vouchers for orphan indications. And that provides, immediate, I don't know what I just did there. Did I just put immediate financial return once the NDA is received? But for whatever reason, the rules at the FDA are the priority review voucher is only available for the first indication for which a product is approved. So that was already approved for Mytesi. So we moved to a second generation anti-secretory, which comes from the same plant, which works by the same mechanism of action, and interestingly is about 1/10 the price to manufacture. So we don't get to leverage, all the chronic safety that's already done with a product that is FDA approved, but cholera is an acute indication. So the clinical trials are 3 days. We already have a roadmap of what the clinical trial design looks like from studies that we did with Crofelemer, and we've already reduced the risk quite a bit with the approval that we have to go with the IND that was filed, that was approved to go into phase 1, because it's a recognition that NP300 is a different product under botanical guidance and therefore can be available for that priority review voucher.
Okay, got it. What led Magdalena, the JV, to focus initially on ADHD in adults as its target indication?
Yeah, so we looked through our 2,300 plants. They didn't all have some firsthand field investigation in the CNS area, but as I said, about 20% of them did. And there was several that met, it's signs and symptoms that you're looking for in the field. So focus and executive function, and you have sort of a consult with the shamans and the healers in the field. And ADHD has really emerged, adult ADHD, as quite a resistant problem, not just a childhood disease. We all think of it as a childhood disease, but about 50% of the time, it persists into adulthood with great resistance or intolerance of the side effects of medications that can be effective in a child. So we really focused on that as an unmet medical need, and third parties market research put it at like an $18 billion market opportunity. And we do have our first 3 candidates, which we're not naming what those plants are, that really seem to be a really good match from the traditional use to go after that indication and in about a year, create enough value that we could bring in a partner that really recognizes that value and takes it all the way.
And so you're planning to focus on the well-known psychoactive psychedelic plant sources, which are sort of now finally acceptable in the U.S. for clinical development?
Actually, sort of the opposite. We're not focusing on the psilocybins and the MDMA and MA. However, the companies that are focusing on that really have done an amazing job of working with and negotiating with regulatory agencies to do clinical trials that are set and setting to give them a better shot of actually learning from how they have been used traditionally. So we're looking to partner with those companies that are putting the expertise and the efforts towards that. And we'll do what we do on the front end, but with novel mechanisms of action, novel plants, novel botanical medicines, the next generation beyond the psilocybins, which are really fascinating. But, how often do we hear about psilocybin? What's next? What's out there?
Got it. Okay, great. That's very helpful. Thank you for clarifying that. I think we've reached the end of the time here. So Lisa, thank you so much as always. Greatly appreciate it. Again, I'll just remind everyone, if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one with Lisa throughout the conference here today, send me an email, Blum, B-L-U-M at lythampartners.com, or again, visit the website, lythampartners.com /virtual. Click on the one-on-one meeting request button. We'll look to get you taken care of. So again, thank you so much, Lisa, for your time. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks. Always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Great. Enjoy the conference, everyone. Thank you.